This episode is brought to you by Netflix. The Four Seasons is back for season 2, starring Tina Fey, Will Forte, Coleman Domingo, Marco Calvani, Carrie Kenny Silver, and Erica Henningsen. After a difficult year, your favorite group of friends continues their tradition of vacationing together, now with a baby in tow. From the Jersey Shore to upstate New York and Italy, their getaways are sure to take unexpected turns where comedy ensues. Watch The Four Seasons, now streaming only on Netflix.
Faraday presenta Ojos con Alergia y Picazón contra el Jardinero. Y el ganador es Faraday Extra Fuerte. Para aliviar la picazón de los ojos por alergia, actúa más rápido y supera a Claritin y Flonase aún a las 24 horas. Faraday, adelante.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Stone Zone right here on the Roger Stone Show. Now I have a guest who I have wanted to have for some time. Thomas J. Baker, I'm going to call him Tom, is the author of a terrific book, The Fall of the FBI, published by Post Hill Press. I strongly urge you to grab it. I found it fascinating because I needed to understand why it was that 29 heavily armed FBI agents in full SWAT gear, wearing night goggles and brandishing fully automatic M4 assault weapons, stormed my home on the morning of January 19th, 2019, to arrest me for the first time nonviolent crime of allegedly lying under oath for Congress. I had no prior arrests. I had no criminal record. There was not a firearm in the home. And because I'm universally recognized thanks to CNN, I most certainly was not a flight risk. My lawyers had told them previous times that if they intended to charge me, I would be happy to turn myself in. But somebody in the Justice Department and somebody in the FBI decided this over-the-top raid was necessary, and it was approved by whoever was the head of the FBI bureau in Miami at the time. That poor bastard has tried to text me and email me several times insisting that he never approved it. Well, but he's lying. So, I want to understand what's happened to the once widely respected and vaunted FBI, once viewed as one of the premier law enforcement organizations in the world. And there is no better person to explain this to us than Tom Baker. He served for over 33 years as an FBI special agent in a variety of leadership positions, dealing with terrorism and criminal challenges. He was the first FBI agent on the scene when there was an attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan, a subject on which I'm about to finish a book. Tom has been published in the Wall Street Journal, the Hill newspaper, the Washington Examiner, the Washington Post, the Spectator, and the Federalist. You've seen him on Fox News, Fox Business, as well as CNN's Crimes of the Century. Tom Baker's international experience is also extensive. He served as the legal attaché at the American Embassy in Canberra, Australia, where he was responsible for maintaining U.S. law enforcement interests in a large part throughout the Asian Pacific. He was then assigned to be the legal attaché in Paris, France, where he developed expertise not only in Western Europe but in much of Africa. It is a huge honor for me to have Tom Baker, who holds a bachelor's degree from Fordham, master's degree in public administration from John Jay College, and has successfully completed the senior command course at the Police Staff College in Bramshill, England. This is a fellow who knows what he's talking about. It is my high honor to have Tom Baker join us today in the Stone Zone.
Well, I'm honored to be with you, and I really appreciate that very gracious introduction.
Well, Tom, you're a very accomplished figure, and I think you are the very best man, based on your terrific book, The Fall of the FBI. Folks, go out and order this book right now. You can easily find it online. I found it fascinating. It was a page-turner. I couldn't put it down until I finished it. This past Christmas, I gave it to a number of my friends as a gift. It's published by Post Hill Press. It's called The Fall of the FBI. Folks, go get this book. I think you'll enjoy it. But, Mr. Baker, you've argued that the FBI's fundamental problems began when it drifted away from its law enforcement mission and towards an intelligence mission. When exactly did that transformation begin, and why do you think it happened?
Yes, I think all of the recent problems, including the situation with you and so many others who had their rights abused, and that's what it was an abuse. I think it all traces back to the change in culture, and that happened before Comey. It was done by the man who handpicked Comey, Bob Mueller, when he was director. If you let me just take a minute and explain this and lay it out for people. Bob Mueller became the FBI director just 5 days before the September 11th attacks, which were shocking to our entire system, our entire society. And the attacks happened on a Tuesday. On Saturday morning, Mueller was summoned to Camp David, where President George W. Bush was with many of his top advisors, planning their reaction, their response to this horrible attack. And Mueller went there. Well, in the essentially 3.5 days had gone by between the attacks on Tuesday and that Saturday morning, the FBI had done what it does best, investigate. And in those 3.5 days, they had identified all the hijackers, their financial support, their past travel, their connections going back to Al-Qaeda. And Mueller was ready with this report in hand, and he started to give the report to the president, George W. Bush, in this rustic setting in Camp David, Maryland. And Bush cut him off and said, "I don't care about that. I just want to know how you're going to prevent the next one." Later that same morning, George Tenet came up and presented a plan of action, Tenet being the CIA director at that time. And when he was done talking, George W. Bush said, "That's what I want to hear," turning to Mueller as he said that. Mueller told us on numerous occasions that he was humiliated by that, and he vowed to change the FBI's culture. And that's the word he used. And he wanted to make it into an intelligence-driven organization. Now, many people, could say, well, maybe that was called for at the time. And some of it might have been. But the reality is, in changing the culture, it led to a lot of problems, and it led ultimately to misfeasance and malfeasance.
Well, as you know, the charter of the CIA very specifically prohibits them from any activities on American soil. That's a joke, of course, given their nefarious history of violations of both law and the Constitution. Whereas the FBI was supposed to be the premier investigative government bureau in the country. And it was. It seems to me that they have been, sadly, very heavily politicized. Growing up, it's interesting. When you're in high school, they give you a copy of a book called Masters of Deceit by J. Edgar Hoover. I don't want to get into a long debate about Hoover. He did a lot of good things. He did a lot of things that were overtly political. It's not why we're here today. But for most of its history, the FBI's primary purpose was investigating crimes and gathering evidence for future prosecution. Now they seem to have morphed into an intelligence mindset. You've just explained to us why. By the way, George Tenet got the Medal of Freedom, which after the failures of 9/11, I don't honestly think he was entitled to. Did the Bureau lose something essential when agents stopped thinking about investigations and start thinking like intelligence officers?
Absolutely. And there's a fundamental reason for that. And your mission for everybody, and if you're selling automobiles, whatever you're doing, your mission affects your behavior, affects your culture, and organizations develop a culture. In law enforcement, and this applies to state and local police as well as the FBI, in law enforcement, consciously or unconsciously, your activities every day are leading you to the day when you have to stand up in court, stand up before a judge, stand up before a magistrate, stand up before a grand jury, raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to a set of facts. Now, that develops a certain mindset. Now, in the intelligence world, they necessarily operate to a different paradigm. They're very free-wielding in their thinking. They're allowed to and encouraged, especially intelligence analysts, to think of any possibilities, any possible explanations. They're very free-wielding in their thinking, and they are not guided or hemmed in, you might say, by our Constitution, particularly the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights. So that develops a different mindset. And with that mindset, in intelligence agencies, they use every day deceit and deception. And I've spoken to a lot of them, and they will tell you this leads to problems in their own personal life. They get so used to what they call operating, we would call it lying, that it leads to family problems and problems in the workplace. So there's a whole different mentality. And once you become an intelligence agency and develop that mentality rather than the law enforcement mentality, you're much quicker to bend the truth or bend a set of facts to satisfy your political masters.
Yeah, I think of the old TV show Dragnet. Remember Joe Friday used to say, just the facts, man. We're just interested in the facts. That's investigative work. That's police work. That's what the FBI used to excel at. The Central Intelligence Agency, I have a long piece on this I just wrote. This has become an epically politicized and corrupted organization. I am curious about how the creation of the Director of National Intelligence position changed the culture inside the FBI. Today, Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas wants to close that office and shift all the responsibility for declassifying documents to the CIA, which means we'll never learn the truth about anything. It's one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. But how did the formation of the Officer of the Director of National Intelligence change the culture inside the FBI?
Well, that was part and parcel of the reaction, and understandably, but in reality, the overreaction to the September 11th attacks. There was a lot of talk about a lack of coordination, a lack of connecting the dots. Some of them may have been true, but that's a risk we take in democracy by segregating and separating people who investigate American citizens from people who investigate or study, research foreigners. So one of the many things they did, they reorganized the whole government. They created the Department of Homeland Security through a lot of agencies together. They created the Director of National Intelligence, which just created another layer. So you had the Director of National Intelligence over the Director of the FBI and the Director of the CIA and a dozen other agencies. So it created another layer going up and up and up. And that's another side problem that's happened with the whole reorganization of the government, as well as particularly with the FBI, is the layering and the layering of more layers of bureaucracy on top of more layers of bureaucracy.
Well, I guess I would have to argue that the CIA director could have declassified all of the documents that proved that Russia was a hoax during Donald Trump's first term, but he did not do so. And then more recently, the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, had the courage to declassify those very documents. Tom, we got to take a quick break for a commercial message, and then we'll be right back with more. I want to talk more about your great book, The Fall of the FBI. And we're back in the Stone Zone here on the Roger Stone Show. We're talking to Thomas J. Baker. He's allowed me to call him Tom. He's a 33-year veteran as a FBI special agent, has had a distinguished career in law enforcement. He's written a terrific book, The Fall of the FBI, published by Post Hill Press, which I really commend to you. And we've been talking about the shift of the FBI from being an investigative law enforcement organization to being, unfortunately, more of an intelligence gathering organization. Tom, you spent decades inside the Bureau. If an FBI agent from the 70s or 80s walked into headquarters today, what would shock them the most?
Well, one of the two things, actually, the part and parcel together. The increased bureaucracy. Once Mueller took over, and it continued under Comey, and Wray did nothing to curtail it, the bureaucracy just grew. Mueller created so many more divisions, so many more executive positions in headquarters. For instance, around 2000, there were 10 divisions in FBI headquarters, each headed by an assistant director, and the assistant director reported to the director. Now, believe it or not, there are 30 divisions in FBI headquarters, there's an extra layer of executives above those assistant directors between them and the director. It's just growing tremendously. And part and parcel of that, looking to the CIA, Mueller also created and enhanced the position of FBI intelligence analyst. So now there are thousands of intelligence analysts, and they're given a lot of status and independence. There had been analysts early on in the Bureau, maybe one or two here and there to different squads, squad of agents being a group of anywhere from 12 to 20 agents to help them with their work. But now they're an independent entity on their own, and they call a lot of shots. And a lot of agents at the time when Mueller was doing this objected, and they said the model of the CIA intelligence analyst just really doesn't fit in an agency like the FBI. And part of the reason is they're just so freewheeling. And we saw it come to bad fruit in the so-called Richmond memo, where two intelligence analysts, an individual and her supervisor, came up with this paper asserting that traditional Catholics were somehow a threat, that they were potential extremist terrorists, right-wing terrorists, with no basis in fact. It was just raw speculation. That would have never happened in the old Bureau. You had to have substantial predicate information for alleging or making an investigation on any U.S. citizens, even in domestic security cases. I think those are the biggest changes.
It is quite extraordinary. Let's talk about Jim Comey. It's interesting. He and I were both charged with the same crime, lying under oath to Congress. There's a huge difference. I was not guilty, but not allowed to prove that in a biased Soviet-style show trial in D.C. James Comey, based on the evidence, I think it's fair to say, when you have an email in which he specifically directs one of his associates, a law associate, to leak classified information to the New York Times and then denies that under oath, I'd say that's pretty strong evidence of guilt. But he was allowed to quietly turn himself in. There's no 6 a.m. raid on his home with CNN TV cameras 25 feet from his front door. Comey presents himself as a defender of the institutional integrity of the FBI. Critics argue that he accelerated many of the trends that have damaged the Bureau's reputation. Tom, what is James Comey's true legacy?
He has done more damage to the FBI and its reputation and to our country than any other FBI director ever. You alluded earlier to J. Edgar Hoover. As a lot of these issues that we are talking about, and you're talking about, started to break, Senator Leslie Graham, who was then chairing or was one of the prominent people on the Senate Judiciary Committee, at one hearing he said, and I quote him in my book, "James Comey has done more damage to the FBI than anyone since J. Edgar Hoover." And I assert that that's a very unfair comparison, because J. Edgar Hoover had almost a half century, 48 years, to do whatever damage he did do, whereas Comey, in just a couple of years, did irreparable damage. He initiated an investigation of a presidential campaign that ultimately became focused as an investigation of a president in May, after Trump was president for several months, and ultimately spilled over an investigation of a dozen, at least, American citizens, including yourself, without any sufficient predicate information. And he
no probable cause. Never had a probable cause. Never.
In Comey's own book, he admits the initiation of Crossfire Hurricane, the Trump campaign, was based on a second-hand rumor that was related to a Trump campaign worker, fellow Papadopoulos, in London, by a diplomat in London. In a conversation they had, he related a second-hand rumor about quote-unquote dirt on Hillary Clinton. Based on that, he opened this investigation of presidential campaign. Now, that's outrageous.
All right, I'm afraid we have to wrap it up there. I want to thank our friend Tom Baker and his book, The Fall of the FBI. Go out and order your copy today. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?